What's up, YouTube? It's Prhymate. Welcome to my channel. I hope you're having a good day. Hope you're well. I'm sure you can already see the length of the video that you clicked on, so I won't waste too much of your time with an intro. This video has three main purposes. Number one, we'll be doing a deep dive into my favorite year from my favorite player, Russell Westbrook in 2021, and try to look at what made that year so special for him. And because player is always secondary to team on this channel, we will also be doing a deep dive into the 2021 Wizards, a team I loved watching at the time, and one that has not been able to leave my brain since. As for the third purpose of this video, this is the first of three videos where we'll be looking at Russ's game on his last three teams during the 2021 through 2023 seasons. My only ask for you, the viewer, is that you come into this video with a little bit of curiosity, and that if I say something that you think is wild, at least give me a chance to defend the point before you call me a moron in the comments. I feel like that's fair. Without further ado, we'll start off this video by looking at the most important part of Russ's game, his finishing. Despite losing a step or two since his prime athlete days in OKC, Russ still had a great argument for most athletic guard and best pound-for-pound athlete in the league in 2021. And while dunks like these were less frequent, the pressure he put on the rim was as consistent as ever. According to Basketball Reference, Russ finished 65% from 0 to 3 feet, a career high. To see how he did this, I'll be using film from the Lakers game in February. As you can see, they came into the game as the #1 rated defense in basketball at the time. For this first play, the Wizards are in a 5-out set, with the Lakers playing man-to-man. This means Russ is one-on-one with Wes Matthews with no help coming, which ends how you think it would. Again, we see Russ in an isolation out of the 5-out set, this time in the post. Wes gives him the baseline, which he takes easily for another layup. For this next play, the Lakers are ready. A better athlete in Talen Horton-Tucker is guarding Russ, and as he starts this drive, look at how much attention he's demanding, with the other four Lakers all in or near the paint. It doesn't matter though, as Russ again immediately beats his man, this time for an and one. Note how Russ explodes both to jump away from his defender to get space to finish, but also right into the path of the big to take away the possibility of a contest. Great play. Following a miss from Kyle Kuzma, Russ grabs the board and pushes in transition. By the time he gets to half court, it's basically a 3-on-4 break, which should be an advantage for the defense. However, both backline Lakers defenders are covering shooters in the corners, meaning there's no rim protection. Russ cradles the ball like a running back to split the two defenders at the top of the key, and it's yet another layup. This play is pretty simple. Russ is one-on-one with arguably the best guard defender in the NBA, in Alex Caruso. He only needs one dribble in a straight line, and it's a blow-by for another layup. Here, Denny grabs the board and throws the outlet to Russ. As he passes half court, there's three Lakers defenders in front of him. Russ again leaves Caruso in the dust with a slight change of direction, and wins the race with Trez to the rim for another layup. Another Denny rebound and a quick outlet to Russ. When he gets the ball, there are two Lakers defenders on either side of him and both in front of him. They both know he's going to the rim. He still manages to beat both of them there in two dribbles and turn it into a layup. Russ was also great at keeping the defense off balance during his rim attacks. Take this possession. Caris LeVert is getting ready to defend a drive, so when Russ starts a post-up, he's completely off balance. A simple drop step creates enough separation, and it's an easy bucket at the rim. Great footwork. Russ was also at a career high in both efficiency and attempts in the 3 to 10 foot range, taking almost a quarter of his shot attempts from this range at an almost 47% clip. Having these shots in his bag was a helpful counter when defenses sold out to keep him away from the rim, and gave him a new way to punish smaller defenders. Russ finishing is the most important part of his game because of how it sets up the best part of his game, his playmaking. Russ averaged a ridiculous 11.7 assists a night, the third assist title of his career, and the highest per game average since John Stockton in 1995. Let's look at a few examples of how he did that. With all the plays in this section, pay attention to three things: the pressure Russ puts on the rim, how defenses are forced to react to that pressure, and how Russ uses that pressure to make the game easier for his teammates. We'll start in Milwaukee. We're in a zone, both Brook Lopez and Giannis ignore a cutter to zone Russ up on the strong side. Nice floater by Gill after the cut. The next play, PJ Tucker does the same thing, and that's with Giannis on Russ and three other Bucks in the paint behind him. Gill is as open as you can get in an NBA game and nails a three. Note the timing on this play. As Gafford sets the screen, the Bucks look like they might trap. but as soon as Gafford's pick knocks Giannis a bit off balance, Russ lobs the pass into open space for Gafford. Bad foul, and one. Here, Drew puts himself out of position, and Russ makes him pay, sealing him behind his body while he draws the attention of Lopez. This frees up Bradley Beal for a dunk off a nice cut. Rush drives can often put the defense in no-win situations. Here, after a Wizards stop, Russ is in transition and being guarded by PJ Tucker. If Bryn Forbes doesn't help on this drive, it's probably a blow-by for a layup. So instead, he does help, and Hal Nutta gets a warm-up corner three. Another no-win situation here. After Russ beats Lou Will on an isolation, Ibaka is helping on a definite layup. But the second he actually commits to helping, it's a bullet pass to a cutting Mo Wagner. Ibaka is completely out of position and gives up the and one. Great stuff here. After getting an angle on the defender for a drive to the rim, Russ flattens that drive, effectively setting a pick on Zubats, who's helping. Wagner is already open, but Russ still lobs the pass to him to make sure Pat Bev can't deflect it, and it's another three. Next, let's look at Russ's rebounding. Russ averaged 11.5 rebounds in 2021, good for 7th in the league. To put this in perspective, only one guard in NBA history has ever had a higher rebounding average, when Oscar Robertson pulled down 12.5 a game in 1962. So the best guard rebounding season in almost 6 decades. No biggie. I know lots of people will try to talk down on this by saying it's stat padding. My issue is that the film doesn't really bear this out at all. Do you see how many of these are offensive rebounds? How many are heavily contested? How many long rebounds he seems to get to before anybody else? How many times he is completely out of position or outnumbered or both and still gets to the board? How many other guards in NBA history are making this kind of impact as a rebounder with this kind of consistency? And to paraphrase the man himself, if it was easy to do this, wouldn't more people be doing it? Keep in mind too, the Wizards were a better rebounding team across the board in 2021 compared to the previous year. I think it's fair to say that he wasn't single-handedly responsible for that, but I also think it's fair to say the guy who grabbed almost a quarter of their total rebounds during the season deserves a fair amount of credit for the improvement. Anyways, other reasons Russ' rebounds are inherently valuable is how he uses them to fuel his transition attack. Here, off a miss, the Bucks do a pretty decent job of getting back, but it doesn't matter. Russ still turns a 2-on-5 fast break into an open layup. And then, after boxing out another great guard rebounder in Bruce Brown, Russ takes exactly 4 seconds to get up the floor and blows right by KD for an and one. So next we're going to talk about what was Russ's biggest weakness in 2021, his shooting. He shot about 38% from the mid-range, 32% from 3, and 66% from the free throw line, all well below NBA average. His true shooting percentage was also 6 points below NBA average, which is not good. Still, there were some positives. After a down year in Houston, Russ had a really solid year in catch and shoot situations, shooting a healthy 36% on those looks. He also scored 1.06 points per possession in spot-up situations, good for 66th percentile in the league. So despite the low 3-point percentage, Russ was still a solid floor spacer. I also think there's clear value in a guy who finishes and passes as well as Russ being a threat as a shooter all over the floor. If you can't hit the shot with elite efficiency, at least hit it enough that the defense guards you. And it's in this way that Russ in Washington still distinguished himself pretty clearly from the non-shooters like Ben Simmons or Draymond. Bradley Beal, the clear best pull-up shooter on the team, didn't play in either of these Hawks games, so Russ had to replace that production. And despite them taking the threat of his jumper seriously and contesting the hell out of some of these shots, he was still able to do exactly that. Next, we're going to move to my personal favorite part, defense. Buckle up, because we're going to be here a while. So when most people think about Russ's defense, they think about plays like this, getting in passing lanes to make plays in transition. And don't get me wrong, those are good plays, both for Russ and the Wizards. But good team defense is more than that. For example, here's my favorite Russ defensive play from 2021. Fourth quarter in Boston, and Wizards up 2. This Tatum-Tice pick and roll is revealed to be a decoy, as Tice immediately rescreens for Kemba. As Kemba curls around the screen, Lopez steps up to take away the pull-up. Kemba hits Tice open on the roll, and Bertans makes the right play to step up and stop the drive. Great play call by the Celtics, and looking at the closest Wizards defenders, it should mean a wide open corner 3 for Semi Ojeleye, who came into this game shooting about 38% from 3. Emphasis on should though. Watch Russ here. As soon as Tice starts to pass this ball, he sprints about 30 feet in under 2 seconds to get a solid contest on the shot. This might be a weird favorite defensive play to some, because technically all Russ did here at most was slightly alter a shot, but I think that's oversimplifying it. The Celtics ran a really smart set really well for an open shot, and by processing and reacting as quickly as he did, Russ turned that wide open shot into a contested one, which can mean all the difference in the world. Also, note where he lands. Mid-sprint, he was still mindful enough to jump away from Semi to avoid a foul. This kind of effort could be the difference between a Wizards rebound and a Celtics score. To drive that point home, a few minutes later in the same game, the Wizards lead Semi wide open, and he makes him pay. This was the trend. Russ used his frame, athleticism, will, and defensive awareness to make consistent defensive impact across multiple positions and roles, and make the offense's job as hard as possible in general. He often also took on the challenge of guarding the other team's best player, especially at the end of games, and made plays there too. A point guard being willing to guard Giannis here with no help is already notable, which makes the stops that he was able to get that much more impressive. Just to drive home how different on defense he was as a Wizard, the clips you're seeing are from a video called Russell Westbrook Just Can't Guard Stephen Curry, which at the time was very accurate. In that video, you'll see Steph win his matchup with Russ in a variety of ways. On ball, off ball, isolations, pick and rolls, transition, etc. Generally, Russ made a lot of mistakes, and Steph consistently made him pay. And coming into his game against the Wizards, Steph was maybe having the best stretch of his career. In 10 April games before that, he averaged 41 points on an insane 75% true shooting while hitting half of his 14 attempts from 3. And in the game before the Wizards game, he torched the second best defense in the league for 49 points on a bunch of shots like these. Then, he had one of the worst shooting nights of his career. Let's look at how. Here, a good Draymond screen gets Steph a bit of room, but Russ does well to get around the screen and close that gap quickly to still get a contest. Great pursuit by Russ for the steal, which leads to immediate points as then he gets a fast break layup. A 2-for-1 here. First, Russ blows up this pick and roll attempt by Looney to stay connected to Steph. The Wiz overhelp in the paint a bit, and Wiggins gets a look for 3. After the rebound, look at the picture-perfect technique on closing out to a shooter. Russ shades Steph left because that's where his help is. Great awareness and effort by Len on the block. The very next play, Russ again blows up a pick and roll, this time with Draymond. Beal stays with Steph a beat too long, and the Wiz do give up an open 3 to Bazemore, but still, very solid initial defense. Watch Russ's off-ball technique here, as the Warriors run Steph around 3 straight screens. He gets 0 separation and the possession fizzles. And finally, after getting hounded all game, Steph finally gets free from Russ, splits the defense beautifully, and guess who's waiting for him at the rim? Excellent contest without fouling, an effort to grab the rebound, and push immediately for free throws on the other end. Steph finished the game 2 for 14 from 3, 7 for 25 overall, and a game low -25 on the night. People might try to discount this as just an off night for Steph, and maybe, he's definitely allowed to have those. I just don't think that makes it any less impressive for Russ. The effort and attention to detail needed to guard Steph this well on and off ball can't be overstated, and Russ did about as well as you can individually. Don't get it twisted, Steph is Steph, and he might go for 40 on these same looks. The important part here is Russ disrupting the rhythm of a historically tough cover all game to help his team secure a win. For impact's sake, the Wizards were about 3 points better per 100 possessions with Russ on the floor versus off per cleaning the glass, and Basketball Index ranked him as their 5th best point of attack defender in the league. On the chart, there's a clear gap, but he's within spitting distance of some of the better guard defenders in the league, like Caruso, Simmons, and Tybal. Basketball Index also had him on their All-NBA defense 3rd team next to Jrue Holiday, another elite defender. Note the high grades in defensive versatility and matchup difficulty. The impact was there on a team level too. After being 27th in defensive rating in 2019, 29th in 2020, and 27th again the first 32 games of the 2021 season, the Wizards were 10th in the league in defensive rating the last 40 games. We'll contextualize this a bit later, but still, very impressive turnaround. Next, we'll talk about Russ in the clutch. So I could definitely start and end this section with a compilation of all the big shots Russ hit as a Wizard. And yeah, that would be pretty nice. But that wouldn't show the whole picture. A great man once said, "You play to win the game." And to me, a great clutch player does whatever they can to consistently put their team in position to win games in crunch time. even games the team probably wouldn't otherwise be in. To me, production in the clutch will always be more than who is taking the last shot, and using that definition, it would be hard to find a player who gave his team more production in the clutch than Russell Westbrook in 2021. Russ once again led the NBA in clutch points on above average efficiency, the third time in his career he's done that. His field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, and free throw percentage all jumped in the clutch as well. And among players with 10 or more clutch games played, he ranked 9th in games played, 10th in minutes per game, 18th in rebounds per game, and 10th in assists per game. And yes, all of that is legitimately impressive for what I hope is obvious reasons, but it's also more than that. It's legitimately hard not to stress how dominant Russ looked sometimes down the stretch of games. For example, fourth quarter of a tie game in Staples Center against the defending champs. Despite solid defense from Caruso, Russ still manages to cross into open space. LeBron has to help on this drive, and Russ makes an on-time, on-target pass. 3-ball, corner pocket. Later in the same game, he would hit this and one layup in OT to push the lead to 3, and then perfectly defend both of the Lakers' attempts to tie the game afterwards. Another great example is against the Pelicans. On a night where Bradley Beal and Rui Hachimura combined to shoot 13 for 42 for 36 points, and where the non-Westbrook Wizards went 1 for 21 from 3, Russ had 36, 15, and 9, with 18, 8, and 3 coming in the fourth quarter and overtime. In that OT, every single Wizard point was either scored or assisted by Russ, who won the game by drawing a foul on Zion Williamson with 1 second left and knocking down both free throws. But it's not always going to go like that. In a loss to the Spurs, where he missed 17 of his 26 attempts, all of his 3 attempts from 3, and had 6 turnovers, he still managed to score 14 in the fourth with 3 rebounds and 4 assists, and some very good defense on DeMar DeRozan at the end to give the Wizards a chance. It's this sort of resilience that I think encapsulates Russ' play in the clutch as a Wizard. And he really drove that point home down the stretch of the season. With the 8th seed in reach in the last 5 games, the Wizards twice played the team in front of them in the standings with a chance to move up. Both games were close. Down 9 to start the 4th in the Pacers game, Russ pulled down 5 rebounds and dished out 4 assists in the quarter. And while he only shot 1 for 5, the one shot was a massive layup with under 30 seconds left to give the Wizards the lead. LeVert tied the game to force OT, which Beal, who had 50, had to sit out due to a hamstring injury. In that overtime, Russ either scored or assisted on all 9 Wizards points, including drawing a shooting foul with under 2 seconds left and hitting the go-ahead free throws. He then wrapped the game up with this block as time expired, possibly his best play of the year. Against the Hornets, he scored 8 points on only 2 shots in the fourth due to 6 free throw attempts, grabbed 3 rebounds, and dished out 3 assists. But in typical Russ fashion, it's more than that. He made plays all over the floor in the fourth to help with a win. This was my favorite. Wiz up 1 with under 2 minutes left, and look at where Russ is when Rozier starts his drive, and then look at how quickly he gets in position for this contest at the rim. Then after the offensive rebound, look at the effort in pursuit of the ball. No stat recorded here, but this is winning basketball. And just because you don't get an assist doesn't mean you didn't make a play. This rush drive draws the help of Zeller, causing Graham to help the helper and try to take away a Russ pass to Lopez in the dunker spot. So when Russ hits Graham's man with a bullet pass, he has to close out harder, which causes him to give up the middle. Ish smartly takes advantage of this and hits a nice floater to extend the lead. In all, the Wizards erased an 11-point fourth quarter deficit and stole the 8th seed from the Hornets on the last day of the regular season. So entering the fourth in these games with the Wizards down a combined 20 points, Russ played all 29 possible minutes, scored 17 points on 12 shots, with 11 of those 17 being to either tie or take the lead, created another 19 points with his 8 assists to only 1 turnover, grabbed 10 rebounds, 4 of which came on the offensive glass, and was a plus 26 in the 2 biggest wins of the season. The Hornets game in particular really sums up the Wiz as a whole in the clutch too. Because yes, Russ was great, but that comeback was a group effort, with great moments and poise from Beal, Ish, and Lopez. The vets were a big reason the Wizards were improved in the clutch. After finishing 27th in net rating in 2020, the 2021 Wizards finished 9th. Russ pretty much immediately took on a leadership role in Washington, and it was cool to watch how much the team responded to him in that role. Rui Hachimura, who was born and raised in Japan, referred to Russ as senpai, and Denny Advia at the beginning of the 2022 season publicly thanked Russ for improving his mental toughness. Your best player sets the tone for your team, and Russ embraced that role in Washington like he always does. And when teaching of a more inexperienced roster was needed, Russ embraced that role too. Things like leadership can be hard to quantify at times, but his voice was very clearly respected in the locker room. Here's All-NBA guard Bradley Beal on Russ and his leadership.
I didn't understand how he was getting these triple doubles every night. It was mind-boggling. Like initially, I'm like, I didn't believe it. I'm like, maybe Steven just boxing everybody out and just letting them come in to get rebounds, right? And so, but to see him do it on our team, it's like, no, he's in the trenches. He's actually fighting in there. He's grabbing rebounds. He's pushing the ball. He's making plays for guys, and he can really care less about scoring. Like, and the biggest thing, he wants everybody to get better. He wants everybody to do well. And it doesn't matter who's on the floor with you. We can bring up 3 guys from the G League, and he's going to expect you to play like he expects you to play. And he's going to hold you to that same level and mentality that he holds himself to. And I think that's what helped me in my play and my individual approach to the game this year, because I had a guy who tells me every single moment of the game, keep going, B, keep going, B. He's in my ear every second. And that's motivative because he's an MVP. And I sit down, I shut up, and I listen whenever he speaks.
So I don't believe in perfect basketball players. There's always something you can do better, and while Russ was great in 2021, that applies to him as well. The first one is most obvious to me, free throw shooting. During his first 9 years in the league, he shot about 7 attempts a night at an 83% clip. He was still at around 7 attempts the next 3 years, but this time at an only 72% clip. But in Washington, it was worse than ever, with 6 attempts at a 66% clip. For a player who is in the paint as much as Russ is, and draws as much contact as he does, that percentage needs to be higher to make teams pay for the fouls and try to get the most out of his attack. The necessary shooting improvements don't stop there. Russ only shot 39% on his pull-up 2s and 28% on his pull-up 3s. Much like the free throws, efficiency in this area is crucial. Teams will always give Russ room to take this shot to cover his drives, so he has to hit it as consistently as possible to make them pay for not guarding him closely. Something around a 5% jump in both of these areas might not seem like a big deal, but it would really help round out his offensive game and raise both his offensive floor and ceiling. On the other end of the floor, screen navigation and off-ball defense were also weak points. Some of this is unavoidable, as the same bulk that helps Russ be able to rebound and guard bigger players also gives him a weakness getting around screens at times. Still, some of this can be chalked up to attention to detail and positioning. Remember, perfect isn't the goal. Better is. Generally, I don't think these were back-breaking defensive mistakes, but good offensive players or teams can target this weakness, so it's definitely something important enough to be addressed. Some improvement here would make Russ an even more versatile defender going forward than he was in 2021. The final one is turnovers. Turnovers aren't always the worst thing. High-usage players are going to turn the ball over sometimes, and as Ben Taylor noted in a breakdown of Russ's game in 2019, some of those turnovers are just the result of a high-level playmaker trying to make a play. Still, I do think Russ can absolutely do a better job in the future cleaning some of these up. 37 of his 65 games were 5+ turnover nights, which is really high even after you take his high assist numbers into account. So what does all this mean? Just how good was Russ in 2021? Good question. So first off, if there aren't 5 guys in NBA history who could realistically have the season you did, and the only 3 that would even come to mind are LeBron, Magic, and Oscar, I think you did something pretty special. My personal opinion is that Russ overall was an All-NBA caliber player. I'm not the only one either. The NBA writers had him 7th in All-NBA voting, just outside of 3rd team All-NBA, and Basketball Index had him on their All-NBA 3rd team as well. Considering he was All-NBA 3rd team on 2 different teams both of the seasons before his Wizards stint, it doesn't seem that far-fetched to me. Basketball Index also had him 13th in wins above replacement overall and 5th among guards, behind only Steph, Luka, Dame, and CP3. And an advanced stat based on wins is the right one to use, because above everything else, this season should cement Russ as a winner. In 2020, the Wizards finished 22 games under 500. Then, during the 2021 season, they experienced multiple major injuries to key players, Russ himself included, and a 2-week mid-season stoppage of games forced by a COVID outbreak, on top of some very very questionable team-wide decisions that we're going to get to later. And despite all of that, they finished the year 4 games under 500, an 18-win improvement. They would also shake off a 17-32 start to the season and a 0.6% chance at a playoff spot according to ESPN to go 17-6 in their last 23 games and make their first playoffs in 3 seasons. And we not even done yet, because in his last 40 games, Russ had legitimate MVP caliber impact. Over that stretch, he averaged 24, 13, and 13 on 45, 34, 68 splits, and according to NBA.com, the Wizards were 9 points better per 100 possessions with him on the floor versus off, which we'll call net swing from here on out. To put that in perspective, the 21 Denver Nuggets had a net swing of 8.9 with MVP Nikola Jokic. And he only got better as the season went on. With 10 games left in the season, and the Wizards still fighting to secure a playoff spot, Russ averaged a ridiculous 25, 14, and 16 with 2 steals on 46, 33, 79 splits, with an even more ridiculous 16.3 net swing to get them over the finish line. Steph Curry, MVP third place finisher, and fellow May Player of the Month, had a 10.6 net swing during the same period. And after a disappointing showing in the first play-in game against Boston, and with the Wizards' playoff chances on the line, Russ, who torched the Pacers all year at a near historic rate, did it again with an efficient 18, 8, and 15, and a game-high plus 30 and a near 30-point Wizards win. On his play, Russ had this to say: "You know what? Definitely. I feel like I'm a player that can do it all. Defend, score, whatever it needs that needs to be done. My job changes every night, and I feel like I'm one of those players that if I need to defend at a high level, I can do that too. If I need to score at a high level, I can do that. Pass, I can do that. Rebound, I can do that. You want me to coach? I can do that too. I just feel like I can do everything." Sums it up really nicely, I think. So I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. What about the playoffs? And yes, this team got blitzed by Joel Embiid and the number 1 seed Sixers in a quick 5-game series. Which brings up an interesting dilemma for me in this video, because I'm not really sure that matters all that much for this team. It's not like anybody confused this team with a contender before the season, and just making the playoffs with the odds that they had is something that their coaching staff and players should feel good about. Success is hard to measure in the NBA sometimes, but I have a really hard time thinking this team didn't meet expectations. And yet, with all that said, I still feel like this team wasted a great opportunity. In this part of the video, I'll try to explain why I feel that way. We'll look at the roster as I saw them coming into the 2021 season, look at why their playstyle wasn't built for the playoffs, and look at some possible solutions that might have helped. And we are obviously going to start with Bradley Beal. Beal was second in the league in scoring in 2020 at just over 30 points a night, and he did it in a variety of ways. He was a talented slasher, using his athleticism to get to the rim, and great body control to finish acrobatically over, through, and around defenders. He paired that slashing ability with a solid floater, and a really deadly pull-up and step-back jumper. He wasn't as efficient as a 3-point shooter as he was early in his career, but in my opinion, a decent part of this is due to an increase of the degree of difficulty of those shots. He wasn't a great playmaker, but he was a reliable one, more than capable of making solid reads when the defenses collapsed on him. In the NBA, defenders work to take away what you do best, but with a player like Beal, who's as comfortable as he is all over the floor and with a hand in his face, it's hard to know what to try to take away, which more or less puts the defense at his mercy. He was a legit All-NBA caliber player in 2020, and at 26, I thought it was fair to say he had more to show us. I also thought his transition finishing, cutting ability, and off-ball shooting made him a natural fit next to a playmaker like Russ. Moving on, Thomas Bryant was one of the rare centers who was both athletic enough to catch lobs and finish at the bucket, while also being skilled enough to consistently shoot from the outside. He was still raw and very prone to mistakes defensively, especially in the pick and roll, but effort was never an issue with him, and when you add a willingness to run the floor hard, some really intriguing flashes, both as a passer and a self-creator, and an amount of energy that very literally cannot be overstated, you can see why I was so excited to see him play with Russ. Bryant looked great in the bubble with more touches, so I thought there was a real chance he could emerge as their third best player. Davis Bertans got a new contract from the Wizards in the 2020 offseason, and the reason why is kinda obvious. He's 6'10", and he makes shots like this with consistency. Bertans was one of the very best shooters in the league by any calculation in 2020, and did damage in transition, off of screens, and even the occasional self-created bucket. He created a ridiculous amount of gravity off ball even when his shot wasn't falling, and if he gets hot, watch out. Rui Hachimura was solid in his rookie year with the Wizards in 2020, and the flashes he showed were eye-opening. Simply put, most NBA players Rui's age didn't have his frame, size, or strength, and most of the ones that did weren't as quick and athletic as he was. And with that frame and athleticism, Rui brought some nice skill as a finisher, as a mid-range shooter, and a ball handler. Combine all these with a solid on-ball defensive foundation, and the sky's legitimately the limit for him. The Wizards used their first-round pick in 2020 on Deni Avdija, a 6'9" wing prospect with solid athleticism, legitimate ball skills, and really great touch and vision as a passer. Deni was also a solid rebounder with good defensive technique both on and off ball for his age, and some legit potential as a shooter. And with his experience in Israel for both the national team and his pro team Maccabi Tel Aviv, there was reason to think he could be a solid contributor at the NBA level right away. Off the bench, the Wizards had some potentially productive vets, starting with speed demon point guard Ish Smith, who's still effective as a spark plug and was coming off his best three-point shooting year as a pro. They paired Smith's fastball with the changeup of free agency addition Raul Neto, a very solid shooter, decision maker, and energy guy at the one. In the front court, they added dependable backup big and hookshot enthusiast Robin Lopez. There were a variety of younger, more unproven players, so I'll focus on the three I was most intrigued by. First, we have Garrison Matthews, whose appeal to this team should be really obvious from these clips. He can shoot the ball. He brings solid hustle and energy and athleticism at 6'5" as well, and those things matter, but they're definitely side dishes when compared to his potential as a floor spacer. Isak Bonga was a 6'9", 3D wing prospect with a skill set coming into the 21 season being much more focused on the D part. Offensively, he was a work in progress, although he did have some solid moments in transition as a decision maker off the catch and as a shooter. Both Bonga and Matthews got minutes on the 2020 Wizards, and despite that team being bad, the advanced numbers had them both as clear positives. Remember that, it'll be important. The last one is 28-year-old NBA rookie Anthony Gill. Gill was a 6'8" forward who played 3 seasons in the EuroLeague with Khimki in Moscow. He didn't have one distinct skill, but makes up for it by being solid all over the floor with no real weaknesses in his game. Also, his EuroLeague experience meant that he was already well acquainted with what it took to be a pro. So, the lack of experience and consistent defense or shooting probably meant this wasn't a championship contender, but still, 2 stars whose games fit pretty well, and a young talented roster who complemented their stars pretty well. I thought this was a playoff team that could potentially make some noise when they get there. Now that we have my thoughts on the roster, let's take a quick look at how the team liked to play in 2021. We'll start on offense. The Wizards didn't take a lot of attempts in the restricted area, but they were efficient when they were there, finishing with the 9th best field goal percentage at the rim. They were also great in the paint on non-restricted area shots, finishing 2nd in both attempts and field goal percentage. They were 2nd in mid-range attempts as well, but only 20th in field goal percentage from there. From 3, they weren't very active or accurate, finishing bottom 10 in percentage and 2nd to last in attempts. And while they were great at getting to the line, finishing 1st in free throws and free throws attempted, they still left a lot of points there too, only finishing 19th in free throw percentage. Here I've listed their most used play types, how frequently they used them, and how efficient they were with those plays compared to the rest of the league. Green is good, yellow is okay, and red is bad. 3 of their 5 most used play types were below average efficiency, with transition being the only place they excelled. So basically on offense, their plan was to play really fast to disguise how bad the half-court offense was. On defense, the Wizards generally chose to play a bigger traditional center and drop to protect the rim first and foremost, surrounded by 3 guards on the perimeter. The idea was to help keep ball handlers out of the paint and emphasize more contested pull-up jumpers, and this reflects in their most used defensive play types. As we can see, they were very good at stopping the roll man and screen actions. However, the trade-off was a poor job containing ball handlers in the pick and roll, and combined with a lack of size on the perimeter that led to a lot of open spot-up threes. Now that we have some background on the team as a whole, let's look at the 3 biggest issues that held them back from a more competitive showing in the playoffs. Keep in mind, these are all 3 different issues, but they do build on top of each other. The first one is a clear preference towards the veteran players on the roster. So after the Bryant injury 10 games in, we have a core of Russ, Beal, Deni, Rui, and Bertans. When trying to make successful lineups around your core, the players you surround them with should emphasize their strengths and cover their weaknesses. Coming into the year, this team's biggest weakness by far was defense. They had solid positional size across the board, but there wasn't a great screen navigator or rim protector to tie things together. To me, this means the ideal players to play next to this core defensively were wings with the ability to switch and guard multiple positions, or bigs with the size and athleticism to protect the rim and crash the boards. But as we look at the minutes distribution for the Wiz, we can see this isn't what Coach Scott Brooks prioritized. In this top 10, we see our core, Garrison Matthews, who more or less fits the bill, and then the other 4 are 3 vets we covered earlier, and veteran center Alex Len, who was brought in after the Bryant injury. Despite really big needs defensively, they gave over 4,500 combined minutes to 2 6-foot point guards and 2 traditional centers who don't really address those needs at all. This lack of dynamic defensive pieces means that while you'll likely be solid in your principles, a bad matchup can doom you. Let's see some examples. Here against the Clippers, Denny does a great job of closing this gap after getting hit with a screen and recovering to Lou Will without fouling. Lou has to pass out, and Terrence Mann has to try to isolate against Russ, which goes nowhere as the Wiz get a stop. The very next time down, the Clippers put Denny in a guard-to-guard screen to get him on Lou again. Then they run the same pick and roll, but due to a better pick angle and more patience from Lou, Denny can't get free and Lou buries a pull-up 3. 2 different results, but the only thing stopping this from being 2 wide open threes is a rookie wing basically winning a 2-on-1 by himself. Later in the same game, the Clippers try another pick and roll, but this time it's 6'9" Mo Wagner at the 5. Wagner's also in a drop, but has the mobility to meet Kawhi more at the level and deny the open pull-up. Good defense. Wagner, in my opinion, offered a nice enough change of pace at the 5 despite his size to earn some minutes. But in 42 games with the Wiz, he racked up 17 DMPs and only played more than 20 minutes 7 times before he was traded on March 25th. Comparatively, Lopez over that same 42-game stretch played every single night and averaged 20 minutes a night. Coach Brooks didn't just slightly favor Lopez here, he favored him enough to make Wagner a non-factor a lot of nights. It was a little better on the surface with the player Wagner was traded for, Daniel Gafford, a springy mobile rim protector and lob threat who added some desperately needed athleticism around the rim, and technically he was rewarded for this, playing more minutes than either Len or Lopez after getting to the team. But remember, none of these 3 can play together, so Gafford's minutes were basically being cut to make room for 2 players who offered a less effective version of his skill set. Which is how you get nights like the one against the Bucks, where he played less than either Len or Lopez despite outproducing them both put together. Funnily enough, Matthews almost did the same to the Neto and Smith duo in even less minutes during this same game. A fact I will use as a segue to talk about Matthews and Bonga again because I think my biggest issue in terms of playing time is with them. In 2020, both Matthews and Bonga were efficient off-ball wings who played with great effort and were clear positives on a bad Wizards team. In theory, they make perfect sense, not just next to Russ and Beal, but all of the 2021 Wizards core. And despite this, they combined to play less than 70 minutes more than Howell Neto. To put it in perspective, Matthews, maybe the closest thing to a 3-and-D wing on the roster, played just over 100 more minutes than Ish Smith, the 3rd point guard on the depth chart who missed almost 30 games due to injury. And it's even worse in Bonga's case. Due to an injury to Rui, Bonga actually started the first 4 games of the year. And while his numbers were nothing spectacular, he was a clear positive, being a plus 21 in 4 Wizards losses where the team was a minus 31. And then he played less than 400 minutes the entire rest of the year. Again, a 21-year-old wing who impacted games positively for them in 2020 was ready when his number was called due to injury to start the next season and played well. His reward for this was to basically be benched for the rest of the season. Bonga admittedly wasn't great in most of his minutes after the benching, but is it fair to ask for consistency from a player when you refuse to give him consistent minutes? Let's move on. The second issue is how these choices from the coaching staff hamstrung their lineups. As we take another look at the Wizards' top 10 in minutes played, another problem presents itself kind of quickly. How many balanced lineups can you make with this group of players? For example, here are the catch and shoot numbers for Russ, Denny, and Rui. Fair to say as a trio, this is pretty far below average. So a lineup featuring these 3 should take this into account. This lineup does not. As Len sets the screen here, look at how the Magic play Beal. They are allowed to do this because they aren't scared of Len as a threat in the short roll, or Denny and Rui as outside shooters. It's a good shot from Russ, but it's not good offense. Same lineup, but with Lopez in for Len. Another double on Beal for another Russ 3. But as Russ catches this pass, all 5 Magic defenders are in or around the paint. Again, good shot, but the defense barely has to move. I don't necessarily hate these lineups with Lopez or Len. I just think it's foolish to lean so far into traditional lineups when neither center you played big minutes was guaranteed to be playable by the playoffs. Your entire offense should have been built around getting Beal and Russ to the rim to cause havoc, but despite solid efficiency at the rim for both, the volume was far too low, with only 18 and 19% of their respective attempts being at the rim according to Basketball Reference, the lowest percentage of Russ' career and the third lowest for Beal. And with spacing like this, it's not hard to see why. The lineup issues don't stop on offense. Wizards up 1 and under 6 seconds left. Neto gets beaten a backdoor cut to the rim for what should have been an easy layup. Great awareness, positioning, and hands by Denny to save the day, but bad defense by the Wizards. Up 1 with under 10 seconds left in Toronto, Neto attacks off the catch. He doesn't see Bertans in the corner and attacks a really good defender in OG Anunoby, which gets him nothing. Then, instead of just guarding up, he flops on the drive, which leaves Gary Trent Jr. enough room to pull up and end the game. These plays are frustrating, but made even more frustrating when you look at the situation closer. In the Warriors game, Neto only played 7 minutes, but was still trusted to guard a player half a foot taller than him with the game on the line. And looking at the last lineup in the Raptors game, we have Russ, who had a rough night with 23 points on 25 shots, but still made plays like this one where he creates 2 wide open threes in 7 seconds, Bertans and Denny, who combined to hit 7 of their 14 threes, and Gill, who grabbed some important rebounds and drew this charge on Siakam to get possession with the lead late. And this is where the reliance on vets comes back to bite you. Garrison Matthews scored 17 points on 7 shots, hitting 4 of his 6 attempts from 3. Neto was 2 of 11 for 4 points and missed all 4 of his attempts from 3. And it's not like he was some great matchup defensively for either of the Raptors' 2 main ball handlers. So why did he get those closing minutes? I'm not trying to pick on Neto here either. He was efficient, made good decisions, played hard, and was consistently in the right spots on both ends of the floor all year. Definite helpful player for the Wizards who more than earned his minutes. I'm not mad at him for these games either. In such a long season against some of the best teams in the world, bad games and mistakes are going to happen. My issue is the team was so happy to play the vets heavy minutes that the effectiveness of the lineups they played in was an afterthought. Which brings us to the Wizards' third issue, the adjustments. For this section, I'll be focusing on the Wizards' loss in February against the Celtics, a game Beal called, quote, the goofiest I've ever seen in my life. I can't disagree. We'll pick it up in the fourth quarter here with about 9 minutes left. Russ is late on his coverage of Kemba, Lopez gets out of position trying to cover for him, and Tice gets a layup. The next play, the Celtics go back to the pick and roll with Kemba, and as the Wizards try to trap him, he calmly finds Tice for this mid-range jumper. Another pick and roll, and despite Bonga being in position, Lopez jumps at the fake, giving Tice another wide open jumper from the same spot. Yet another pick and roll involving Lopez, and even though he gets a better contest here, Tice is already in a great rhythm and hits anyway as the Wizards are forced to call a timeout. So as we look at the Celtics play-by-play, we see that in 5 possessions of a close fourth quarter game, the Celtics got 8 points on 4 shots just from Daniel Tice, which is not ideal. The Wizards did get 1 stop during this stretch, and here it is. Great individual defense from Bonga here to get around the screen and force a tough shot. Bonga didn't do much offensively this game, missing all 5 of his shots, but he was excellent defensively, and he made the Celtics work for everything with his length and activity. Note that all of these plays are also in the fourth quarter of a close game. Great shot here from Tatum, but this is still excellent defense from Bonga. Back to the game, the Celtics try another pick and roll, but Wagner is in for Lopez, so they can't create an advantage here. Kemba then isos Neto, and this is a shot he makes in his sleep with basically no contest. On offense, Russ drives and draws the defense, then zips a pass to Neto wide open in the corner, which he doesn't shoot for some reason. He was shooting 38% from 3 coming into this game. He's as open as you're going to get in the close game in the fourth. He just has to shoot this ball. Instead, he throws the pass to nobody in particular for a turnover. Both Wagner and Beal are confused as to why he passed this one up too. Scott Brooks is about to make a lineup change here, so let's look at what we know based on what we've seen in the fourth quarter so far. 1. If Lopez is on the floor, the Celtics will attack him in the pick and roll, and the Wizards don't have a great answer when they do. 2. The only person small enough for Neto to guard is Kemba, and Neto can't guard Kemba. 3. Bonga has done the best job of anybody slowing down Tatum, and Wagner's mobility allows you to neutralize some of Tice's screening actions. For this situation, I think your best available lineup is Russ, Beal, Bonga, Bertans, and Wagner. Instead, Brooks takes Wagner off for Lopez, leaving us with a very odd lineup of Russ, Beal, Neto, Bertans, and Lopez. Surprisingly, the next 3 plays are pick and rolls directly involving Neto and Lopez. The Celtics are so sure attacking these two will lead to good offense, they're basically ignoring the Tatum-Beal mismatch, for now, to target it. They don't score on any of these 3 plays due to some excellent help defense from Russ. This could have easily been 7 points. They are persistent though, and get Neto and Lopez involved in an action near the rim, leading to a cut and a nice floater by Green. And then again on a dribble handoff that leads to a kick out to Semi Ojeleye for a 3. With just over 90 seconds left, the Celtics finally remember the biggest mismatch on the floor, and Tatum basically gets an uncontested shot here. After 2 Wizards buckets, the Celtics are down 5 with 46 seconds left. A Wizards stop and free throws ends this game. Instead, the Celtics put Lopez in the same pick and roll they've been using for the last 8 minutes, and Tatum faced better defense than this at Duke. Next possession, and again, a Wizards stop and free throws ends the game. Instead, Beal anticipates a dribble handoff, which leaves him completely out of position when Tatum rejects it. This leaves Lopez on an island with Tatum, but only for a bit, as Tatum again drives by him easily for another layup. Then, on the inbound, the Celtics immediately double Beal. Brooks tries to call a timeout, but it's too late as Beal slips and falls out of bounds. The Wizards now get their 3rd chance to end the game on a stop, but Beal gets beat again and the help is far too late on Tatum's game-winning layup. Just to wrap this goofy shit up, the Wizards are seemingly surprised when Beal is yet again doubled off the catch. He can't find an angle to get the ball to Russ and misses a contested shot over 2 people, and the Wizards lose by 1. So it's been almost 3 years since I watched this game, and it still sticks out to me because of how well it illustrates the issues that we were talking about earlier. The Wizards viewed vets like Neto and Lopez as essential, and guaranteed them heavy minutes regardless of matchup. So the issues that came from those minutes aren't really issues at all in their minds, just weaknesses that needed to be schemed around. Even when the other team is going at them over and over again, benching them was never a real option. It's probably weird to make playoff success the bar for a team that was clearly happy just to be there, but for me it's the easiest way to judge the process of the team. What did you spend the regular season emphasizing? How do your schemes and tactics hold up when the other team gets time to exploit them? And when this happens, can you make the necessary adjustments? Teams that win in the playoffs have answers for these questions. The Wizards did not. Let's take a very quick look at how the playoffs went because of that. On offense, sometimes the shots went in, sometimes they didn't. But regardless, the process was riding. For example, Beal had a much better time scoring, both in Game 1 and the series than Russ did. But notice in both cases how contested these looks are. The Sixers were allowed to pack the paint and send extra help at the Wiz duo all series long, with little threat of getting burnt from the Wizards supporting cast. On defense, sometimes the individual effort wasn't there, like on this easy back cut given up by Russ. But even when the effort was there, this was just a hopeless situation overall defensively. The Wizards were both way too tiny on the wings, and way too slow and unathletic inside to consistently stop any Sixers actions. You just can't out-effort and out-heart giant team weaknesses like this in the playoffs against a good team. There were some bright spots though. For one, I thought your stars showed up. Scoring was a big issue for Russ in the series, shooting only 33% overall and 25% from 3, but his rim pressure was as consistent as ever, and the free throws it created helped stabilize his efficiency a bit. It also helped him average just under 12 assists with over 20 potential assists and almost 30 assist points created per game. After leading the league in all 3 categories during the regular season, he did it again during the playoffs. He was still Russ on the boards too, averaging 10 rebounds, with just under 3 of those being on the offensive glass. And while I'm not exactly sure how, because he was fighting through double and triple teams most of the series, Beal still averaged 30 on a ton of tough shots. The efficiency wasn't great due to a rough series from 3, but he was a consistent scoring threat. He also passed the ball well, averaging almost 7 potential assists during the series and creating over 10 assist points per game, both very healthy numbers. Overall, Beal was responsible for just over 40 points a game of total offense in the playoffs, and Russ just under 50. The 3 other parts of your core that were healthy played well enough too. Rui was incredible, averaging 15 on a hyper-efficient 71% true shooting from all 3 levels, and was second in rebounds to Russ. He struggled defensively at times, which was expected in his first playoff experience, but the effort and fight was there all series. Gafford provided even more of what he did in the regular season: efficient offense, impactful defense, and activity on the boards. He led the Wiz in both effective field goal percentage and blocks, tied Russ for the most offensive rebounds in a lot less minutes, and was the only playable center by the end of the series. And while Bertans was hampered by an injury and only played 4 games, and was memed to death for his Game 2 performance, he was still second on the team in threes attempted, threes made, and three-point percentage. So definitely not perfect, but also not the worst showing by your core. How did your role players fare? Not well. Both Neto and Ish had more shots than points, and while their combined 19-6 assist-to-turnover ratio and 47 total assist points created helps a bit, it was still a rough showing. Ish was able to use his athleticism to be an effective playmaker on both ends despite the undersized lineups. Neto, however, looked lost on both ends a lot of the series and was targeted really consistently on defense. And while Len and Lopez scored pretty efficiently with 57 points on 39 shots, they also barely out-rebounded Ish Smith and struggled defensively regardless of who was on the floor. And that's kinda it. Those 4 were the only other players to play more than 40 minutes in the series. I really can't stress how irritating it was to see a 4-guard lineup on the floor in a must-win game and not see anybody really bring it up. So I'll take this time to shout out 2 of the creators that saw what I saw at the time. D Talks a Lot, a diehard Wizards fan, and JD with the West Wolf podcast. Both made content talking in depth about the issues we discuss here. I'll leave links to both of their channels in the description.
National Guard? Yes, it's me again. Scott Brooks out here putting in 4-guard lineups. Come get him.
So was there another path forward for the Wizards? In short, yes. Let's go back to February and look at the best basketball they played all year. During this stretch, a 6-17 team went 8-3 going into the All-Star break, with 6 of those wins being against playoff teams. As we look at the minutes during this stretch, I don't think it's a coincidence that every player getting regular time outside of Neto and Lopez fits the athletic switchable archetype that we talked about earlier. If they had been more willing to experiment with this playstyle after the All-Star break, it could have been a real turning point in the season for them. So let's have some fun and see what it could have looked like if they did. To the left is the minutes played during the 11-game sample we discussed. To the right is my proposed changes with the same minutes. Players on both lists are in blue. I moved Denny to the starting lineup, kept Bertans in the 6-man role, and solidified consistent minutes for Wagner, Matthews, and Bonga, while also keeping the vets involved and giving Gil a test run to see what he has. The offense gets the biggest bump here in my opinion. Not only is there more versatile play finishing and connective playmaking to field consistent offense around Russ and Beal, there are also more willing shooters on the floor. More 3-point volume would lead to more spacing for the duo's drives, which in turn would open up the offense for everybody else. Remember, this was a team that was second in attempts and 20th in field goal percentage from mid-range. Just turning 1 or 2 of those attempts per quarter into higher efficiency looks in the paint or behind the line changes the offense entirely. The downside is that with the lack of size and athleticism around the rim, easy points off of lobs, putbacks, or dump-offs might be harder to come by. On defense, less size inside does make the paint more vulnerable and makes rebounding both much harder and much more important. Still, it also means a lot more versatility when guarding ball handlers, and what you lack in size at the 5, you more than make up for in mobility. More length on the wings would also be welcome too, and would give them more options to get stops. Increasing versatility and physicality would lead to more mistakes by the offense, which gives an elite transition team even more opportunities to run and eat off of easy looks. And now, when you trade Wagner for Gafford, he unlocks the team's true potential via the paint presence on both ends, and Gil can take over either as a backup 4 or a small ball 5 depending on how you need to use him. This lets you mix and match playstyles as you need to and play to your strengths regardless. Look at the difference in these playoff rosters. Similar minute distribution, most of the same players, but a lot more size and athleticism to hang with the Sixers on the wings, and run in transition, more versatility for effective adjustments, and maybe most importantly, everybody on the floor has a very clear role. And all it cost was minutes from players who probably shouldn't have been on the floor in this series in the first place. Let's listen to what Kyle Korver said about his time with Allen Iverson in Philly.
I was a 2nd-round pick. I'm not guaranteed the first year or the second year. And like what you need more than anything is just some confidence. Like just to believe that you belong on this court. And so we had no one else on the team who could shoot at all. And like for AI, like if you can't shoot, like why would I pass it to you? I'll just shoot it, right? So he was like, arm around me every day, like, shoot the ball, shoot the ball. Just like breathing confidence into me. Like he was, he's legend, right? Like he is, I mean, there's like, he's on another, you know, in another stratosphere of just like his legendary, iconic career and personality and image. And just to have that person with me, you know, encouraged me. He was amazing for me. He was one of my favorite teammates.
Couldve was ready. He just needed the opportunity and the confidence from his team. We see unproven guys get both and come up huge in the playoffs every single year. So why couldn't the Wizards give some of their guys the same chance? The Wizards beating the Sixers in the playoffs would be a long shot, but wasn't the Hawks beating that same Sixers team also a long shot? Philly definitely had the better team, and actually outscored Atlanta in the series, but the Hawks still made all the important plays down the stretch and walked away with a road Game 7 win and a conference finals berth. Two Eastern Conference teams had to fight back from 14 and 20 starts just to make the playoffs. Both teams had major pieces missing when they played the number 1 seed Sixers, and both teams, in my opinion, had the personnel and skill sets needed to expose the flaws in the Sixers' game plan and make those series tough. One of those teams leaned into their skill set and was even able to slay the Giant. But for all the reasons we talked about, the other guy ran off the floor. In a shortened season with all the previous season's elite teams not healthy and out in round 1, and the remaining elite East teams all suffering major mid-playoffs injuries, there was a major opportunity there for a dark horse team to make a real run at a championship. The Wizards could have entered the playoffs in this down year with arguably the best backcourt in basketball, a dynamic offensive attack fueled by a nice complementary core, and enough pieces to field a really solid defense and fuel their elite transition attack. The same opportunity the Hawks took advantage of was available to the Wizards, but because of how poorly they prepared during the regular season and their refusal to adapt, they had no chance to do the same. So we have talked a lot about a team from 3 years ago that finished the year under 500 and was very, very lucky to win one playoff game. Why? A couple of reasons. I think with all the games and moves and drama and discussion surrounding the NBA all the time, we sometimes lose the details, but those details matter, both in the short and long term. Taking the time to look at where a team like the Wizards succeeded and fell short and why was hard and very time consuming, but I also feel like it increased my overall understanding and appreciation for the game. On a lesser note, a ring just isn't a realistic goal for all 30 teams, so a team like the Wizards playing the right way all year and making a run at the end of the year to sneak into the playoffs should still be celebrated in my opinion. You don't win without great players, but it's clear that the higher-ups in the organization, the coach, the front office, ownership, etc. are even more important to wins and losses. I obviously wasn't a fan of some of Scott Brooks' coaching decisions throughout the year, but this team's fate isn't just on him. Head coaches have people they answer to, and who knows what kind of direction he was getting from his bosses. We can talk about his mistakes all day, but the only reason he was still in place to make any of those in the first place was because the people above him allowed it. Which brings us to Russ. I wanted to use this video to look at what Russ did during the season, but also the context of the team situation he did it on, to try to get the best picture of the caliber of player he was. And with this context taken into account, I think Russ's already impressive season looks even more impressive. This wasn't Russ helping a team that was some perfect fit for what he did well to get his numbers. This was him maximizing his skill set to cover massive holes in the lineups he was placed in, and in the process, revolutionizing what all-around impact can look like at the guard position. Again. A lot of the connective tissue that most guards need around them to guarantee consistent wins was either in short supply or missing entirely, and yet, the versatility of Russ's skill set was able to, at times, completely override whatever they were lacking and optimize whatever he had on the floor with him, usually just enough to get them across the finish line. The playoffs did prove there was a limit to how much this could work without proper support, but what can any player really do without proper support? And that, I think, is the story for both Russ and the Wizards in 2021. Even during an all-time, all-around season, when winning at the highest level is the goal, there's only so much one man can do. I clearly like this Wizards team more than most, and for a number of reasons, I don't think they were that far away from making a run. Unfortunately, That was not a belief shared by the Wizards organization. Russ fought his hardest, and the team tried their best, but without that belief, their fate was already sealed. I am always very appreciative for anybody who watches anything that I put out or subscribes to my channel. But if you made it to the end of this particular video, I thank you so much. I've been working on this video for the better part of the last few years. There were a lot of times during that period where I didn't think I would ever put it out or it would ever see the light of day. So to be at the point now where I'm recording the part at the end to put it online, it's kind of surreal. So yes, thank you. And this is my part of the discussion, but I do view this as a discussion. So I would love to hear what you think. How did I do? Do you like the video? Did I make some points? Do you have some disagreements? Let me know in the comments. I try to reply to every comment I get. Like and subscribe. I'll be putting out some more content, and hopefully I'll be a lot more active just in general on here in the 2024 season. It's going to be a big one, so I'm going to be watching a lot of basketball, and excited to put these next 2 videos out just to kind of have them out. But yeah, after this, we'll probably do the Clippers video. I'd like to do some sort of NBA preview video just because I have a lot to talk about the upcoming season, and then we will finally handle that Lakers video. Not gonna lie to y'all, have not even started writing that script, so we'll get there when we get there. But yeah, thank you for watching again. That's all I got though. Peace.